Three reasons we must stop the shutdown. This is Steve Elliott with today's CounterDrudge. These are the headlines that the mainstream media is not going to report on the coronavirus crisis, and probably won't even hear on Matt Drudge. So let's get right to it. Reason number one, the models are way off. And I'm going to show you some data on the models. You're going to be shocked. I hope you're shocked. If you can see this chart, you can see that as the predictions for April 4th showed that there'd be huge numbers of hospital beds needed, ICU beds, and of the need for ventilators. Let's look at what really happened. This is what really happened. The projections were 164,000 beds. The actual was 40,000 beds as of April 4th. The projection was 403% too high. The projection for ICU beds was 31,000. The actual was 9,000. The projection was 330% too high. The projection for ventilators was 24,000. The actual was 1,289. That's 1,900% too high. All the actual numbers are actually even higher than the bottom of the projected range. Double or triple the bottom of the projected range, which literally makes those projections meaningless. They're meaningless projections. Let's look closer at the data. And here's where it even gets worse. This is April 4th, what was projected. And here's what, if you go look at it now, April 4th, they adjust their projections to make it look a little better. All of their projections were cut in half. 80,000 beds instead of 164,000 beds. 16,000 ICU beds instead of 31,000 ICU beds. 13,000 ventilators instead of 25,000. These are all still too high, but they just keep adjusting their projection range down in the hopes that eventually they'll get the projections. Why does this matter? Because the entire shutdown was based on these projections. And what's happening in reality is far below the bottom end of their projections. Look at the second reason. This is not a general population pandemic. I know this is going to upset some people because it's been sold to you as a general population pandemic, but it's not a general population pandemic. As I showed you the data from New York, it's becoming more obvious, data from all across the globe, is this is a pandemic of basically two types of groups. The one is people with these comorbidities. This is the list out of New York City. 98% of the people who've died in New York City have one of these comorbidities: diabetes, lung disease, cancer, immunodeficiency, heart disease, hypertension, asthma, kidney disease, or liver disease. Pretty much if you have one of these comorbidities, you need to shelter in place at home. You need to be very, very careful because you are the high prospects of being impacted, of dying from this disease. The second thing is it's a disease of the aged, of the older population. This has been confirmed in New York with the data which comes in from around the world. Look at this, the nursing home impact. 25% of all the deaths in New York City are coming out of nursing homes. 20% across the entire state are coming out of nursing homes. Now, nursing homes, people in nursing homes only represent 0.5% of the population. That means nursing home population is overrepresented by 4,000% of the COVID deaths. This is a disease which affects people with comorbidities and who are older. That's the facts. The third reason why we must stop the shutdown is that millions are asymptomatic, not showing symptoms at all. In fact, this is why the administration and Fauci want everyone to wear masks, because they cannot get the R0 number, the viral number, to drop fast enough. So they want everybody to wear masks. And one of the reasons they can't get it to drop fast enough is because there's lots of asymptomatic people. People will have this disease and have no symptoms, so you don't know where they are. Now, I'm going to argue that that's actually a reason to stop the shutdown. Let me explain. So if we look at the asymptomatic, if you look at this iceberg, now the top of the iceberg above the water are the people who we know have COVID-19. Now, some of the early projections and some of the early data coming out of Iceland and other places showed that 1 out of 2 people are asymptomatic. They have it and they have no idea they have it. But more recently, there's data coming out of China that's showing that more than 3 out of 4 are asymptomatic. They do not show symptoms. They don't show any symptoms at all. Now, what this means is the infection fatality rate is going to drop as we learn how many people are on the bottom part of this iceberg. The more who have the disease and have no symptoms, then the iceberg is going to get bigger, and then the fatality rate is going to drop. And the second thing is it shows that societal controls are meaningless because you really can't stop this virus. You can't stop it. If 3/4 of the people are asymptomatic, but it gets worse, and my thinking, it actually gets better because the iceberg is actually bigger. Because we know that about 80% of the people who get COVID-19 have mild symptoms. So this iceberg gets really, really large, which means, again, that the infection fatality rate is going to drop as we gain this data, and the societal controls become less important because many, 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 many people have this and have mild or no symptoms. This is why we desperately need the antibody test so we can do some sampling of our country and find out how many people actually have this disease. So those are the three reasons we must stop the shutdown. The models have been proven to be entirely off, and the shutdown was based on the model. Secondly, it's not a general population pandemic. It's a pandemic limited to people with comorbidities who are generally over 70. And there's a huge bottom of the iceberg of asymptomatic cases that we don't even know how big it is, and we need some testing immediately so we can all get back to work. This is Steve Elliott with today's CounterDrudge. You can find all these headlines, and we try to give you links directly to the data so you can research it yourself. Thanks so much for taking a listen.